Hey guys, it's Will and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I'm not in my studio today. I firstly wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Today's video has been highly recommended by you guys and I'm super excited to share this skill with you today. So in today's video, I'm going to be teaching you all how to do the perfect over and back stitches. This skill is really quick and simple to learn and will make your leather projects look extra special and professional. If you guys aren't totally sure what an overstitch or back stitch is, firstly let me explain that to you real quick. An overstitch is the method of crossing your needles and thread over the top of the pocket or closure or whatever you're trying to add that extra strength and longevity to if it's being opened and shut often. Whether that's for the top of a card holder or the beginning of a stitching run, or just to add that extra strength when you're making a belt and doing the turn at the beginning of the turn at the buckle end. The overstitch is the ideal way to add that extra strength. As for the back stitch, this is one of the most common stitching techniques in general and should be used at the beginning and end of every stitching run. It firstly means that the stitching will have a much harder, if not impossible, time in unraveling from the beginning of your stitching run. Secondly, the back stitch is the cleanest and most secure way to terminate your stitching run. It is especially useful when you're stitching with a natural thread, like linen for example. This is because when you're stitching with linen, as opposed to polyester thread, or a poly thread, you can't melt the end and mushroom it out to secure it in place. So for stitching with linen thread, before you cut the end off and dab a little bit of glue in the hole, it is highly recommended to do at least 1.5, if not 2.5 back stitches. If you're someone who loves symmetry, you might want to do the same number of back stitches at the beginning and the end of your stitching run, making the end result much more pleasing to the eye. Right, let's show you how to do it, shall we? Okay, so when you're starting your stitching run, you should start 3 holes back, as a back stitch will always be 1 double stitch less than the number of holes you started. So if you started 5 holes back, you'll end up with 4 double stitches, if that makes sense. But 2 full back stitches is more than enough, so let's go with that. When starting any stitching run, don't forget to even your threads up, making sure you got the same length of thread on both sides. Otherwise, you may end up with too little thread on one side to finish the stitching run, which would be kind of bad and very annoying. Now you've started and you're ready to backstitch, the technique is almost identical to that of a normal two-handed saddle stitch. The one major difference is you absolutely never cast your thread on the back side when you're back stitching. If you were to cast your thread, you'll end up with wonky knots that will cause a normal saddle stitch on the way back to be double knotted and not a good idea at all. You'll end up having to undo the entire thing. Aside from the lack of cast, the beginning back stitch is essentially normal. Oh, and don't forget to pull the threads nice and tight, as you won't be able to tighten them once you're stitching normally. There's just too much going on to do it. Alright, we've got into the part where it's time to overstitch the beginning of the stitching run. As you can see, I simply cross over the needles to the opposite sides they were on originally, causing the threads to cross over the top of the card holder, or whatever your project is. In this case it's card holder. There are 2 trains of thought when doing an overstitch. Firstly is the simple crossover with no knot, which is what I'm doing here. This is the one I prefer, but you're more than welcome to do it the following way if you'd like. When you're crossing over the threads, tie a simple knot. Some people claim this is better as it keeps the threads together when pulling them tight and you end up with a stronger overstitch. I have personally found that if you tie the knot over the top, you end up putting too much pressure on that part of the overstitch, and after a while of usage, the knot will actually pull through the leather and cause distortion or tearing where it's supposed to provide strength and rigidity. This is a super annoying thing to happen. Can happen to both, but it's more likely to happen if you tie a knot in your overstitch. As I said before, I prefer the simple crossover, mainly because I think it looks better, but I'll let you make that decision yourself. When you finish your overstitch and it's time to do a normal saddle stitch back over the stitches you've done, it's very simple to line up the threads so they sit nicely next to each other. You can use your needle, your roundel, or just your fingernail to line them up. If you don't line them up next to each other, you'll cross one over the other and it won't look nearly as nice. There isn't really a technical reason for lining them up next to each other, it's simply much more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion. Your results may vary, and again, I'll let you make that decision. Now we're past the slightly tricky part, it's time to do a normal saddle stitch. I'm assuming you got this down as you're watching this video, but if you need a refresher, I'll leave a card in the corner to a video I've made teaching exactly how to do the perfect saddle stitch. So I'll let you click on that if you aren't entirely sure what you're doing. Finally, it's time to do the most important back stitch, the one that terminates your stitching run, and there's a few different very slight variations on how you can go about doing this. The way I'm demonstrating here is going to give you 3 full back stitches, and you'll end up with the ends of the thread being snipped on the front and the back. If you do a half stitch either way, it will result in the snipped ends being on both the front or the back of the leather piece that you're making. The way I'm showing here, you'll have the ends being on both sides, but if you do a half stitch either way, you'll snip it off either both on the front or both on the back. Again, I'll leave it up to you, as it totally depends on the project. If you're attaching your piece to the lining of a bag, for example, and you're not going to see the back of the piece, then you can do half a stitch either way, and you'll have both of the ends being snipped off through the lining and you won't see them. But if you're making something that you'll see both sides, and that project will change your decision making process. If you're doing a wallet, for example, it might be useful to terminate both on the inside of the wallet so you can't see the ends on the outside when you close the wallet. Just an idea. There is an advanced way of finishing a stitching run. When after back stitching, you push the needles between the layers of the leather and snip them off. This totally hides any threads as they terminate and they come out between the layers of leather. But I won't be covering how to do this in this video, simply because it's quite difficult to get right instead of poking holes where you don't want them. So don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below if you'd like me to make a video on how to do this, and I'd absolutely love to do so. Just let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, as I really enjoyed making it for you. As always, if you have any questions at all about this video or just in general, please leave them in the comment box below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all.